Welcome to the fourth lecture of week 5 on modernization and creative communication. In the previous lecture, we had discussed about dead as a medium of communication, and here today in this lecture we will be concentrating on three philosophers, Hegel, Marx and Kierkegaard, and their idea of self, communication and society. So we will investigate the theories of Hegel, Karl Marx and Soren Kierkegaard regarding communication, particularly their departure from the spiritualist tradition. Unlike spiritualism, which often separates meaning from materiality, these thinkers stress the importance of embodiment, the relation or the relational nature of the self and the social context that shape and distort communication. They delve into how communication functions not just as an exchange of ideas, but as a dynamic process that reveals, constructs, and sometimes fractures the self and the society. Their theories challenge conventional notions, offering profound critiques and transformative perspectives on communication. Now, to begin with, we will first try to find out Hegel's view on communication as mutual recognition and Geist and the spirit. Hegel situates communication within the dialectical unfolding of spirit, which is also known as Geist, a concept that emphasizes the unity and the diversity of self-conscious individuals in relation to one another. Hegel's concept of spirit reflects a collective consciousness, and if you allow me to say like this within quote, and I that is we and we that is I. Unlike earlier philosophers like Fichte and Schelling, who focused on an abstract solidarity of I, which means I equal to I. For Hegel, communication is more than a psychological endeavor of understanding. It is a political and historical task aimed at creating the conditions for mutual recognition. This mutual recognition is central to the development of self-consciousness and the reconciliation of individuals within themselves, their world and within each other. The master-slave dialect highlights that self-consciousness depends on recognizing another's self-consciousness. True identity and satisfaction arise through mutual recognition, emphasizing interdependence. A self cannot exist in isolation. It requires an other to affirm and define itself. This relationship between the self and the other forms the foundation of human connection and the development of identity. Now, Hegel rejects the idea of a purely private self. Instead, he argues that the self is fundamentally public and relational. In his famous master-slave dialectic from Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel demonstrates that the self cannot achieve fulfillment in isolation. Instead, it depends on the recognition of another's self-consciousness. This interplay reveals that identity is shaped through a dialectical process involving both conflict and reconciliation. He writes, I quote, self-consciousness achieves its satisfaction only in another self-consciousness, I unquote, emphasizing that individuality emerges through engagement with the other. Now, Hegel's challenges Lockean notion of communication, which posit a very private internal realm of thoughts and feelings. He contends that humanity thrives not in isolated introspection but in communal agreement and shared meaning. According to Hegel, appealing to one's private feeling, or an, I quote, oracle within the breast, undermines the very essence of humanity, which is realized in dialogue and collective understanding. He asserts, I quote, human nature only really exists in an achieved community of consciousness, I unquote. So, for Hegel, the self's discovery and expression occur in the, I quote, the daylight of common life, where it interacts with and is recognized by the other. The reconciliation of subjectivity and objectivity he termed as the union of and non-union. I repeat, he termed it as union of union and non-union. Human nature only exists in an achieved community. For Hegel, communication is inherently public. Now, when we talk about Marx's theory of communication, we find that Marx approaches communication through the lens of social and economic structures, particularly focusing on how capitalism distorts human relationships and alienates individuals from themselves, others, and nature. Though Marx did not develop a comprehensive theory of communication, his critiques of alienation and commodity fetishism offered profound insights into its corrupted forms, right? So, Marx's, I would say, closest conceptualization of communications lies in his discussion of Verkehr, which is known as traffic or exchange, which he critiques as distorted under capitalism. For Marx, authentic communication involves dialogic, face-to-face exchanges that foster mutual understanding and connection. However, in capitalist societies, as we can see, communication is mediated by external forces like money, market, and media, which Marx deems corrupting. He famously declares, I quote, "The world of exchange is an inverted world." Here, exchange refers to money, transactions, and commercialization. So, Marx emphasizes the primacy of direct human relationships, which are often obscured by commodification. For example, workers become alienated from their products of their labor, right, which are transformed into commodities with detached market values. Similarly, mediated communication through media and money alienates individuals from the immediacy of authenticity of human interaction. Now, Marx critiques the public sphere as a domain dominated by market forces that perpetuate inequality and alienation. The commodification of communication reduces individuals to mere consumers or producers, eroding their agency and authenticity. This alienation extends to large-scale communication systems, which Marx sees as inherently corrupt, and unable to sustain genuine human connection. He critiques the geographical displacement of commodities and their detachment from local contexts, which parallels his concern with the loss of locality in communication. Marx's critique of communication under capitalism is still very important, but it has its own limitations. He favored face-to-face interaction, which overlooks the complexity and potential of mediated forms like today's digital connection. Marx also believed that communication could become fully transparent under ideal conditions, but as philosophers, Charles Taylor points out that this kind of idea ignores how communication in large society is always somewhat direct, indirect, and complex. Even so, Marx's focus on the material factors shaping communication is a powerful tool for analyzing media and technology today. He reminds us that communication problems often stem out from deeper inequalities in resources and access, not just misunderstanding. Now we come to the view of Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard, unlike Hegel and Marx, focuses explicitly on the nature and challenge of communication. He introduced a nuanced distinction between direct and indirect communication, emphasizing the paradoxical and performative aspects of authentic expression. In Practice in Christianity, Kierkegaard explores the communicative paradox exemplified by Christ, whose declaration, "I am the Son of God," is both direct and counterfactual. The speaker is human, yet the utterance claims divinity. For Kierkegaard, this tension between the divine and the human illustrates the performative nature of communication, where the meaning of an utterance is inseparable from the ethos of its speaker. He critiques modernity, or he critiques modern view of Christianity for detaching the message from the person of Christ, arguing that the medium is the message. Kierkegaard likens communication to a sign of contradiction. He says, he remarks it as sign of contradiction, where truth often necessitates concealment. He underscores that in his reflections on the Sermon on the Mount, highlighting the ethical necessity of hiding one's good deeds to preserve the purity of intention. Now, Kierkegaard, like Marx, was deeply skeptical of the public sphere, seeing it as something abstract and artificial, what he called a phantom. He believed that this so-called public often undermines authenticity by encouraging people to focus on appearance rather than substance. In his critique of the present age, Kierkegaard argued that society's obsession with publicity and visibility corrupts individuals by pushing them to prioritize how they are perceived over their true selves. This sets Kierkegaard apart from thinkers like Hegel, who saw publicity as essential for mutual recognition and understanding between individuals. Kierkegaard instead warned that public discourse often becomes performative, full of contradictions, and leads to a loss of inwardness. What is that? A disconnect from one's inner truth and deeper values. For Kierkegaard, this inwardness is vital for living an authentic life, something he felt was threatened in a culture obsessed with public performance. So, in Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard examines Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac, a story he uses to illustrate the limits of ethical universality. Abraham's act transcends the universal moral code, relying instead on a private, unmediated relationship with God. This suspension of the ethical isolates Abraham, leaving him unable to explain his actions to others. Right? So, Abraham's plight underscores the tragic dimension of authentic communication. It often involves silence, isolation, and results in misunderstanding. Kierkegaard writes, I quote, "O Lord in heaven, I thank thee. After all, it is better for him to believe that I am a monster rather than that he should lose faith in thee." I unquote. Abraham's inability to communicate his faith underscores the paradoxical nature of truth, which can be deeply personal and incommunicable. Now, let us recapitulate and compare these three philosophers' views on communication. Hegel saw communication as a path to historical reconciliation, helping resolve conflicts, build shared understanding. Marx focused on how external systems like capitalism corrupt communication, turning it into a tool of exploitation. Kierkegaard viewed communication, which is deeply personal, tied to faith and inward truth. Despite these differences, all grappled with definite authentic interaction in a fractured world. So, Hegel sees that self as inherently public. Marx critiques the alienation of communication under capitalism, and Kierkegaard highlights the paradoxes of embodied truth. And the thinkers identify various pathologies, like Hegel critiques the retreat into private life, private feeling. Marx exposes alienation and commodification, and Kierkegaard reveals the tragic isolation of faith. While Hegel advocates for the reconciliation of individuality and universality, Marx and Kierkegaard highlight the limits and dangers of universal frameworks. Marx critiques the capitalist distortion of universality, while Kierkegaard underscores its inadequacy in capturing personal faith and truth. So, these three philosophers have offered transformative insights into the nature of communication, challenging traditional notions and addressing its complexities in modern life. Hegel's vision of mutual recognition, Marx's critique of capitalist alienation, and Kierkegaard's exploration of paradoxical truth remain profoundly relevant for understanding communication in diverse, mediated, and often fractured societies. Their work underscores the necessity for addressing the material, relational, and existential dimensions of communication to foster more authentic and equitable interactions. Thank you.